Hey guys, it's Penguin here and welcome back to another gold making video. In today's video, I really want to talk about one of my favorite professions right now in current Dragonflight. You know, what I'm selling to actually make this so good, where I put my points into, and if you want to start doing this as well, what you should do. Also, I know we have probably all felt this, but I also want to talk about, if you feel like you are behind, if you feel like you've made mistakes, because trust me, I have as well. So we're going to talk about all of that today. Now, with all of that being said, this is definitely more of just a chill kind of raw video, so if you've seen my past couple ones, this will be a little bit different, but I really just kind of want to dive in and show you what I'm actually doing. But I hope you enjoy this. I hope you guys enjoy this type of video. Feel free to let me know, and if you do enjoy it, feel free to leave a like or even subscribe, and here we go. Now, if you guys have been a follower of my streams, you probably recognize this character, but right here is my scribe and leatherworker. Technically, I like to call this guy my main alt, my main being a tailor enchanter, so this is kind of like, my main side character. And right now, I think Inscription has probably been my favorite profession just for the past few weeks, and I really want to talk about a specific item that does take a while to get into, but there's so many different steps before getting to that one that also makes gold. I know that sounds really confusing, but let me show you. And so the items I really want to talk about, kind of my end game for Inscription that's making me a ton of gold, are missives. Now, the kind of downside about missives and the thing that puts off a lot of people is that you do have to guarantee quality 3s. And so if you guys have actually seen my previous very early Dragonflight video that talks about my specialization trees, I actually mentioned that I was avoiding missives or that they were doing really badly because I wasn't spec'd into them. But for the past few weeks, I've actually gotten enough points, put them in the right places, so now I can guarantee quality 3s. And the outcome of that is super good. Firstly, just to show off, right now I do have max Inscription, and right now I'm using a quality 4 multi-craft tool. I will say that is very important. Resourcefulness enchant is super nice, and if we just kind of update prices, you can take a look at the current profit margins. Of course, this changes a lot depending on the day and, who's posting the current prices, but on average, I can expect anywhere between like 11 to 30 gold per, which is a lot. I will just say the Fever Flare is probably one of the best. Anything that uses the blazing ink generally has the best profit margins. We can go here to the Fire Flash, still pretty decent. Now, the Serene kind of is an off and on. Right now it's only about 4 gold, but hey, that's still profit. Then we have the Perilous, and then we also have the Quick Blade. Now, I will say that these 6 probably make me the most gold. Technically, you have like the tool missives and the inspiration does pretty well, as you can see right now, but a lot of these I feel like crash most of the time. Like right now, Multicraft's doing pretty well as well, but a lot of these do crash and it kind of hurts profits. Like right here, Finesse is only sitting at about 35 gold and it's causing a lot of loss right here, but just in general, missives are great. And so, just to kind of show you a little bit more, and then we'll get into the kind of details of this if I pull up my second auction house account. There we go. I can make it a little bit bigger so you guys can see it, and we can just look at our recent sales. And as you can see, now granted I haven't restocked everything, so that's why it's really just a ton of missive sales, but these do sell incredibly well, and the best thing about missives is that you don't actually have to cancel scan a ton, which is a huge thing that people worry about. But right here we have some inspiration, some multi-craft, the Auroras, the Fever Flare, keep scrolling, we have the Fire Flash, Harmonious, and there we go, we get into our other items. And so right now we have about 50k coming in, pretty decent. And if we check for the auctions of today, these are all sales from like the past probably 2 hours or so. If we type in missives, there we go. So right now we have about 30k of just missives sitting in our mailbox, which hey, is pretty good once again. And so yeah, missives have been doing super well for Inscription, so let's talk about actually how do you get to this point, and then I want to cover some like CraftSim things and all of that. Now, as you guys can see, I make the threshold just perfectly, and honestly, most of us will probably be at this skill unless you have any sort of racial bonuses. But the biggest thing, and I think it's the biggest kind of holdback for a lot of people, is that you do have to max out your inscription. Now, you can do this in many ways, but what I did is at valued with the Artisans Consortium, so that is step 4 out of 5, you can actually purchase the rolling pin recipe right here, and then basically you just mass produce these all the way up to 100. Now, I actually did this back when it cost me 12,000 gold to craft each. Now it's down to 3k, so I'm not going to say it's necessarily super cheap, but this is the quote-unquote easy way to max out. Your other options are crafting orders and all of that, but of course that's a lot, more dependent on other people. But once you have that max skill, the other part really is pretty easy, and it's just specialization points. The thing you're going to want to do is actually go into archiving, and you're going to want to put 30 points into overall archiving because this grants overall skill to anything, and of course missives are actually, a part of this. Then you only actually need to put 10 points into shared knowledge. The reason why I have 20 is because I actually unlocked treaties first, because I wanted to do those before missives, so I had to put in an extra 10 to get another subcategory, but actually you only need 10. So that brings us to 30 plus 10, that's 40 points, and then lastly, just max this out, so that's another 20. So right here in archiving, in order to do this, that is 60 points right there in archiving. The final step, which is actually beneficial for everything, which we'll go into in just 1 second, is the Rune Mastery, which is just overall skill for everything. I like to call this the generic trait of the profession, and it just grants skill to literally anything you can craft with Inscription. And so you guys are probably thinking, alright Penguin, this is cool, but you literally just said that is a 100-point commitment. And that is okay, right? Remember, you guys can actually go back and watch that, specialization trees video, and you can look at my current tree. I actually spec'd into archiving first, like I mentioned, then I went into inspiration, then I thought I was going to do inks, and then I just did generic skill, and it took me a long time to actually do missives, but hey, I made it. Maybe you did spec into treaties just like me, so you already have some points into here, so you are already a little bit there. Or let's say maybe you, put points into Rune Mastery for another thing, and that is already completed. So, these other points and these other areas do help a lot. And this really brings us to our next point, which is how much gold you can make without missives. So let's say missives is just something you don't want to do, it just feels super far away, 100 points just seems very overwhelming. That is okay. We can break it down to the simplest thing right now, which is making inks. The beautiful thing about inks is that the recipe difficulty is so low. Remember, your skill just has to be over recipe difficulty to guarantee quality 3s, and 80 is super easy to get. You can hit about, I don't remember the exact number, I think it's about 65 points in Inscription by just, leveling it up. And then of course you have your profession tools, you use, good reagents, and you're gonna hit that skill super easily. And that is where some decent gold comes along. And so taking a look at the Flourishing Ink, we'll just do a refresh once again. Right now with all of my current stats, I'm making about 17 gold per craft. And how you get to this point is pretty easy. Remember, right now we're guaranteeing quality 3, so inspiration doesn't matter at all. So for example, right here I have 30 points into inspiration, and this doesn't matter one bit, so that is 30 points you don't have to worry about. And then really we're just worrying about multicraft and resourcefulness. The first thing you can do, once again, is making sure you have a multi-craft tool, and honestly, the most important thing is just upgrading flawless inks. Going back to the low recipe difficulty, as long as you can get to, recipe difficulty 80, sorry I keep losing the recipe, as long as you can hit 80 or technically 81, throw in 20 points right here, you're making some pretty decent amount of gold. The flawless inks is what actually gives you like a ton of multicraft right here. You get 50% extra inks whenever, multicraft procs. So that is what you really, really want. Technically, if you want to go even more in depth with ink crafting, also max out resourcefulness. So as you craft inks, you might save some pigment, you might save some water or vials, which of course brings down that crafting cost even more. Let's say you want to do that. Now you do have to put in some points right here. It's about 20 points to unlock 2 subcategories, so that's, 20 plus 20 plus 30, so that's about a 70-point commitment. But once again, assuming you guys aren't starting fresh, you probably have points in somewhere here already. And if you don't, remember there's so many first-time bonuses, there's so many, first-time treasures, all of that can actually get you a ton of points at the start. Now let's actually start to build on this, right? So let's say you're like, all right, Penguin, I'm interested in ink. First of all, what you can just straight up do is craft this and, sell it for a profit. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, if you guys haven't commented already, Penguin, I've tried to sell inks and they just don't sell that well. And I was curious about this, so I did throw up some ink on the auction house and they did sell in my case, but I did have to cancel scan. I think I had to cancel them about twice. Now, of course, that's just a one-time thing, so I can't say like they're always going to sell, but I will say I've had success with it. Now, of course, if you're crafting thousands upon thousands, that's a little bit harder, but that is where we actually start to use the ink instead of just selling it. For example, let's go full circle and let's go back to missives. We just talked about missives, and right now with current auction house prices, I'm making 23 gold profit per missive. This is where my first little CraftSim tip comes into play. Remember that all of these items right here, this to craft if you use Auctionator, is coming from the auction house value of the item. So in this case, blazing ink, if we were to craft it, is making us 5 gold profit, selling it at, 16 gold a piece, technically 15.5 gold a piece. So right here, it's profitable to craft, meaning our crafting cost is even lower than this 15.5 gold. But CraftSim thinks we're paying 15.5 and we're still making 23 gold profit. So actually, if we were to craft our own ink, we're making even more profit than it thinks. Technically, if you guys want, you can do a batch of crafting, do your cost and, divide it by how many you get, and you can technically override your price. So for example, I'm not going to do the math right now, but let's say our crafting cost is actually just 12 gold. Throwing an example out there, we can override this item. We're using rank 3 blazing inks, and then let's just put 12 gold. There we go. If you need the format, it's right there. Hit save, and boom, right there, our profit went up just a few gold. If we remove it, it's gone down, but there you go. So technically, you could override this, and now you're making even more gold than it thinks. I'm just going to remove that so I don't forget about it later. But okay, let's take this another step forward, and we have the chilled runes. Let's say this is my final product. Cool, I'm crafting my own inks because I spec'd into here. I also have missives unlocked. Let me actually craft my own chilled runes as well. If we look up the current profit, sweet, I'm making about 14 gold per chilled rune. So maybe that's worth it to me, so I'm going to craft them. So currently, if we buy them off the auction house, that's like 43 gold. Whatever, let's just say our crafting cost is 35. We go back to that missive, we override the price. Let's say we craft our own quality 3 chilled runes at 35 gold instead of 43. We can put in that, 12 gold random right there. And there we go. Profit is now at 30. We can round that up to 34 gold profit compared to whatever was previously the 23. So we've almost gone up 10 gold profit per craft. Now, of course, some people will be worried about the time spent. That's something you can calculate on your own, but I'm just kind of showing you the process of inscription. Now, going back to the points, if you are somebody who wants to do chilled runes, as you can't actually guarantee 260, you do rely on inspiration. So inspiration here is key, which would be another 30-point commitment. So that is, once again, another step forward. Also, you do have to pay attention to, okay, do I need a second tool? But actually, just a quick look at here, the multi-craft is actually the most valuable stat. So in our case, our tool is fine. But sometimes you may want to check to see if, inspiration is actually better. But in this case, it's not, just because of the different qualities are so close together. But yeah, guys, I hope this kind of makes sense. I know this is kind of a ramble, but I hope you can kind of see the processes that I'm thinking of, and you can apply this to anything. Moving on, just real quickly, Ruined Wraithbark is another great item to sell. Right here, I can make about 17 gold profit with these current items, but this fluctuates all the time. And once again, this is strictly just another inspiration craft. So let's just forget about missives for a second. Let's say that still, that missive path still kind of scares you. As long as you put in enough points to get perfect practice, discovery, and inks, you can craft your own inks. You can have plenty of resourcefulness and inspiration, and then you're good to go. And of course, you're going to get plenty of skill by actually doing mastery as well. Now, bringing it back to bare bones, I've kind of skipped over it, but you can also actually just mill your herbs as well. Personally, I don't do it just due to a time commitment issue. I just don't want to spend my time milling, and also I don't have this maxed out, but this is just another 20 points. So remember, going back to my little disclaimer about CraftSim, this right here is using auction house prices. So if you max into milling, sorry, I accidentally just used a spell. If you max out into milling and you can craft, or I should say mill pigments cheaper than the auction house, then your profit for inks goes up even more. Also, just a quick tip real quick, be careful of the items you have in your inventory because that is what CraftSim uses. What I mean by this is right here, this doesn't have a quality, so CraftSim can only use one value, and this is actually a vendor value, so it's using the vendor price of this item. Now, in the case of shimmering pigment, there's technically 3 options, but because I have the quality 2 selected, that is the price it is using, which right now, thankfully, quality 2 is the cheapest at about 3.92. Flourishing, because I don't have any of it, it is also using the cheapest. In this case, is actually tied, but it's likely using the quality 2. And then also, I only have quality 1 vials in my inventory. It's using quality 1, which thankfully happens to be the cheapest. It's also a vendor item. And in most cases, this is how it's going to be. But you might have caught it, and maybe you've once again already commented about it, but let's go back to this blazing ink example. And so once again, we have the water, that's fine. We have the shimmering pigment and using quality 2, that's the cheapest, that's fine. We have a quality 1 blazing pigment, so it's using quality 1 blazing. That's not the cheapest. And so actually right now, because we have that selected, it's thinks that we're actually overpaying for blazing. So what you can do is, because I don't have any in my inventory, just turn on simulation mode and quickly change that. But you can see that that profit has gone up. And now it's actually using that quality 2 to simulate the profit. So using the cheapest materials, actually right here, we're making 9 per craft. If we turn off simulation mode, it's going to go back to that 5 because it goes back to quality 1. So once again, that's just something that CraftSim uses. So if you are somebody like me who just kind of has some random items in my inventory, that is something to be mindful of. Also, just a quick heads up, this video is getting very, very long, but once again, fortune cards are amazing. Fortune cards only rely on resourcefulness and multi-craft, so once again, if you can produce some pretty cheap ink, get that resourcefulness right here, that is all you need. And right now, if we went back to that item, if I can find it, there we go. Right now I am making 20 gold per blazing fortune card. The other ones aren't as valuable and actually negative due to the ink cost, but blazing is super good. Also, following the same patterns as of what I talked about with missives, I do have plenty of points into runes, and sometimes these runes are profitable, but I have to use quality 3. So this is another case where it looks really bad right here, but if I go to simulation mode and click on the quality 3, in this case it's still not profitable, but that profit is not nearly as bad. For example, right here, the chirping, I'm still making -10 with the quality 2, but if I simulate and use quality 3, it actually turns profitable. So once again, just a sake of make sure you are mindful at the quality that CraftSim is using. But yeah guys, that is really why I just love Inscription so much. It flows really well together, and you just have so many different opportunities to make gold. Now, going into the, if you feel behind or if you feel like you've bricked your profession, don't worry, I've been there. I'll post some screenshots on screen, but at the very start of Dragonflight, and actually, once again, I keep referring to that video, but if you go back to the specialization ones, I show off my main jewel crafter, which I completely screwed up because I dropped about, 50 or more points into lariat crafting because I thought I was going to do work orders, which I never ever touched. So I had about 50 to 60 points, quote unquote, down the drain, and I really wanted to focus on gems, which, if you guys don't know, gems are basically a completely different path. As a lariat crafter, you really want inspiration and you want all of the jewelry crafting and all of that. However, with gems, you actually don't want inspiration at all. So I had a ton of wasted points. But in the past 2 weeks, just because I've kept doing my weeklies on that character, getting my weekly knowledge points, all about that, I've actually been able to now guarantee quality 3 gems, and I'm making a ton of profit. If you guys caught it whenever I was showing you guys the auction house, you probably saw a lot of cut gems there, and I've only been doing that for the past week and a half, 2 weeks, because I finally actually quote unquote fix that profession. So if you guys do feel like you've bricked your profession, trust me, there's a way to get out of it. I was right there with you. It took some time, and let's face it, I was discouraged for a little bit, so I didn't do my weeklies, or I should say all of my weeklies, every single week. But if I did, I would have gotten it way faster. But even though I didn't, I was still able to actually recover. So hopefully you guys can take something good away from this video. We talked about Inscription today, but you can apply this to anything. It could be jewelry crafting, it could be tailoring, it could be enchanting, it could be whatever, but hopefully you have some sort of tip you've learned. As always, everybody, if you have any additional questions or maybe you have some tips for some other people, feel free to leave them in the comments down below, and I always try to read everybody's messages. But everybody, as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and have a good day.